So there's this English tourist, and he's on a walking holiday in Ireland, and he gets completely lost. So he sees this farmer in a field. He approaches him, and he says, "I say, old chap, I'm in a bit of a frightful pickle here. I'm trying to find the old manor house, and I don't have the juice of an idea where to go. Be most awfully grateful if you could help me." The farmer looks at him and he says, "The old manor house, is it? Well, that's not a problem at all. What you want to be doing is you go across this stile here, you cross a field, you turn left at the windmill, you cross a brook, and..." No, that's not it at all, not it at all. What you want to be doing is you go over the stile, you turn left, you go to the windmill, you go past the cow shed, you cross the brook, you turn right, and... Sure, no, that's not it either. This is a devil of a problem, I'm telling you, devil of a problem. You know what it is, I'm thinking? You know what it is? If I wanted to go to the old manor house, well, to be honest, I wouldn't start from here at all. So, this is a rather personal view of how I feel things have developed in complexity theory and argumentation. This is a field I've been working in over 20 years now, so one has some rather personal opinions about matters and how things have developed. So first of all, I'd like to thank Francesca, Sylvia, Martin for inviting me to give this talk at Comma in Cardiff. To start off with, as I said, I've been working in complexity theory and argumentation going back 20 years or so. I've been teaching at Liverpool coming up for 40 years now, and in that time one acquires certain mannerisms and methods. One of these is one finds there are particular ways of annoying students during lectures. So this is one technique I use. Hwri Sophia Estyn, Hoekantonun Sifisato, which in its way is perhaps a suitable motto for computer science in general, certainly for algorithms and complexity in particular. Students, being as they are now with standard slipping, don't understand classical Greek, so I have to give a translation. Here is wisdom. Let he who hath understanding count. I am, by the nature of things, however, an equal opportunity irritant. So, my way of irritating academics, marvelous statement which in many ways summarizes my view towards research and research agendas. I'm writing a manifesto. I want nothing, but I say certain things. And I am, in principle, opposed to manifestos, just as I am also opposed to principles. And if I want to irritate both at once, there is this quote which I have as a tagline on my email. I think it's a very strange question that I have to defend myself. I don't feel that. You are all my guests. It's not the other way around. I work for myself. I haven't done it for you or for an audience. I don't think I owe anybody an explanation. So this was a comment made by the Danish film director Lars von Trier after the reception of his rather controversial film Antichrist at the Cannes Festival in 2009. Something I always want to give as an impact statement on research grant proposals. Not yet had the nerve. So what's this talk about? So here I'm going to give, to begin with, a bit of background to the general area of abstract argumentation, focusing on Dung's frameworks. I'm going to look a little bit at the state, principally complexity and algorithmics have reached. I'm going to raise a question which perhaps may seem a little bit odd. Do we actually want to be at this particular point? What direction is this specialist subject heading in? And if it is headed in some direction, well, why do we want it to reach there? So, let's start with the background. In the beginning, there was Dung. Fan Min Dung, 1995, published a classic paper in Artificial Intelligence Journal, which took the confused and rather chaotic process of computational argument and reduced it to a model which was based entirely on directed graph structures. So the nodes of the graph, these are atomic arguments, that's all. The linkage structure, the only relationship that we are interested in is that one argument attacks another argument. And finally, we're interested in notions of collections of arguments which can stand together, collections of compatible arguments, and the way in which Dung's paper describes those are as collections, subsets of the nodes of the graph which satisfy particular properties with respect to the structure of that graph. So then what happened? Then the theoreticians clambered aboard. We had the preachers of our one true semantics. Thou shalt have no other extensions but the grounded. We had the, oh, you don't want to be doing it this way, you want to be doing it this way instead, pundits. And the legions of computational complexity and algorithms experts. As I'll mention in a few slides' time, the word legions is used quite deliberately here. So what did we end with? We ended up from Dung's initial notion of about half a dozen different ideas of what defines a compatible collection of arguments: conflict-free, admissible, complete, prepared, stable, grounded. We went from that point to half a dozen more: prudent semantics, semi-stable semantics, ideal, resolution-based, CF2, inconsistency tolerance, strong admissibility. And this is still going on, so one feels rather, as Macbeth does, looking at the line of Banquo's descendants. What will the line stretch out to the crack of doom? What about the, you don't want to do it this way, you want to do it this way instead cases? So, I always get the impression that something of the motivation for these is a feeling that It can't be as simple as a basic directed graph and subset semantics. This is wanting, this is insufficient. And so, following on from the assumption-based frameworks, which appear roughly around the same time as Dung's original paper, we got preference-based argument frameworks, and value-based argument frameworks, and extended argument frameworks, and weighted argument frameworks, half a dozen different varieties of those. We got probabilistic argument frameworks, and the wheel seems to have stopped for the moment at Gert Bravka and Stefan Voltman's notion of abstract dialectical frameworks. Does it really matter that we have a dozen or more different semantics, that we have at least as many different argumentation framework models? After all, 960 ways of constructing tribal lays, and every single one of them is right. Where has that left us? Well, Guillermo Samari at the first comma in 2006 at Liverpool used this phrase to describe the situation that was active even then. He referred to a plethora of semantics. And we've got a plethora of semantics, but we also have a plethora of models in which to study these. Does that matter? It's not necessarily a bad state of affairs. I would say, and I'm sure many starting research students and researchers coming into the field of argumentation, maybe it's a bit unhelpful. It's certainly quite confusing. Dozen different models, dozen different semantics. In its defense, one can note that if one looks at any paper introducing a new model, introducing a new semantics, what one finds, no matter how weak one may find this to be, is this is always done with some ulterior motivation. The fact that the point of the new semantics, the new model, is linked to basic abstract argumentation ideas isn't forgotten. There are different kinds of working, but the same spirit works all of them in everyone. So, what does that leave? What have the complexity theorists done for us? Here's a style of essay question, which one can't ask anymore. No mathematically based computational discipline can be said to have reached maturity until its first NP completeness result has been proved. Discuss. One can't ask questions like that anymore because they're too difficult. Similarly, one cannot add riders such as marks will be deducted for bad spelling, poor grammar, or handwriting that is difficult to read. I started working in complexity theory and algorithms and abstract argumentation following a talk that Henry Pracken gave at Liverpool when he was visiting Trevor Benchcape. I believe this was mid-2002. And what Henry did was he gave a talk describing work which would be presented at Julia in that year. This is work he had carried out with Erhard Vresik, and this was on a dialogue game called Two-Party Intermediate Response Disputes, or TPI dispute. And this was a game for dialogue game built on Dung's argument model, and which concerned demonstrating that an argument was accepted under a particular form of dung semantics. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, it's graphs, it's algorithms, it's computational complexity theory. I'm sure there are a few people who will recognize the reference there. So, what did we do with this? Went back to Dung's original paper from 1995, and looking through that, there seemed to be an open problem, which was the problem of credulous acceptance for preferred semantics. It's not really important what that means exactly. In effect, it's just a question of you're given an argument framework, you're given an argument, and you were asking, is this argument justified with respect to a particular one of Dung semantics, namely the preferred semantics? So, had a look at this, managed to prove an NP completeness result. Trevor and myself submitted that to AIJ. This was, I think, towards the end of 2002. And we waited. And it turned out there was a very, very small problem, which was the result had already been proved. It's been proved by Yanis Dimopoulos and Alberto Torres. Slightly different context, and this has been done in 1995 and published in Theoretical Computer Science. So, referees are incredibly fussy, and they decided paper couldn't be accepted for AIG. They did give some very useful feedback though. And part of that feedback, we went back, looked at Dung's paper again, and it turned out, and we also looked at the paper by Dimopoulos and Torres just to prevent the same thing happening, and we found that one problem from that hadn't been addressed. So preferred credulous acceptance had been dealt with, skeptical acceptance, whether a given argument was accepted under every extension, every subset of arguments of a particular form, that hadn't been looked at. So we managed to classify that, and as a result, as I said, this is back in 2002, the paper appeared in 2003, we led to a huge series of complexity-based articles and argumentation which have appeared pretty much all over the last 20 years. There are a lot of researchers in this field now. I mentioned, referred to the legion of complexity theorists working in argumentation. Our name is Legion, for we are many. I will leave Trevor to fill in the complete context of that quote. A side benefit we got from this result was in classifying coherence. And we managed to get that result into Artificial Intelligence Journal. As I said, it appeared in 2003, I believe. So, coherence. Coherence is a notion that is already in Dung's original paper. All it means is an argument framework whose preferred sets and whose stable semantics are identical. Dung's paper contains a lot of things. It contains the rudiments of prudent semantics that occurs a couple of pages after the definition of coherence. Dung's paper looks at infinite frameworks, and this is considerable time before Pietro, Massimiliano, Federico, and myself were looking at infinite frameworks. It's before Bart and Martin and Emil Weidert were looking at infinite frameworks. It contains this old canard of argument as a type of von Neumann, Nash, Morgenstern computational game. It very probably contains a number of other ideas which, if one gets round to reading the paper thoroughly, will become clear. So, what's the way we work now? Algorithms and complexity and argumentation. Well, first of all, there is model, the result proved by Dimopoulos and Torres in 1995. This introduces a mechanism which occurs, I think, in just about every single complexity result which has been obtained and which builds on Dung's model. This is something which I refer to as the standard translation from conjunctive normal form formulae to argumentation frameworks. I'm not going to describe that in detail. It's not important what the details are for the purposes of this talk. What is important is that the majority of results are basically just new spins on this, just new directions on this. So the coherence result is a development of the standard translation. So are the results proving problems that are hard in planar frameworks, and in value-based frameworks, and extended frameworks, and in ideal semantics. So this suggests a model designed for carrying out research. We've identified 4 what I will call canonical problems. Does an extension of a particular type exist? Does a non-empty set of arguments with a particular set of properties exist? Is a given argument accepted with with respect to at least one such set of arguments? Credulous acceptance. Is it accepted with respect to all such sets of arguments? Skeptical acceptance. Is a given set of arguments satisfy the criteria which have been set? Verification. So what we do with these, given any new semantics, or given any new model, we just classify each of those 4 problems with respect to that new semantics, maybe having to find a variant of the standard translation. And then we write it up, submit it to the conference or journal that you choose. So what's happened as a consequence of that? Well, as I said, it looks like every new semantics, every new proposed model has been analyzed with regard to that template. So that's the semi-stable semantics. Wolfgang Dvorak and Stefan Waltran use a variant of the standard translation to analyze the semi-stable semantics. That's the value-based frameworks, extended frameworks, ideal semantics, strongly admissible semantics, which Martin and myself have looked at, weighted argumentation framework, CF2, resolution-based, all of those. So occasional twists on things, changing the graph structure, looking at counting problems, looking at average case complexity, the notion of parametric semantics, realizability and signatures, which Stefan and Wolfgang have done a lot of work on. But the structure I'm describing, the pattern of researching, that's pretty much colored complexity and argument going back 20 years. So, there's no doubt, I would say, that computational complexity, algorithmics, is a core subfield in abstract argumentation. I think that is undeniable. we've got a recognized body of problems in the canonical problems. We have a methodology for certainly at least looking at the complexity of those problems in terms of working on variants of the standard translation. So it seems like we have the best of all possible worlds. But if this is the best of all possible worlds, what can the rest be like? So, what have the complexity theories done for us apart from the standard translation, apart from the NP completeness results? What have the complexity theories done for us? Well, we've developed and applied a suite of methods by which real problems in abstract argumentation can be classified. In doing that, we've motivated the study of feasible methods by which hard problems can be handled. But we're doing this in a setting where real problems have to be solved. Did complexity theorists universally, as a group, go and look at real problems? Well, you won't believe what happens next, even while it's happening. This is work I did myself, by the way. So we get things like playing about with the value-based semantics to construct something whose only motivation, well, largely whose only motivation is to show that some argument-based decision problem is complete at a particular level of the polynomial time hierarchy. I'm not going to define what all of that means. Again, it's not really that important. We get that creation being taken and powered up to piece-based completeness results. We get hacking about with environments solely with the aim of showing that acyclic frameworks, which are generally proven to be easy within Dung's model and its variants, we get creation of environments where acyclic frameworks cease to be easy. So, what should we have been doing? First of all, a proof of intractability is a beginning. It's not the end of a study. There is an enormous battery of techniques which have been developed whose aim is to make the unmanageable in terms of complexity consequences manageable in terms of effective algorithms. So we have things like approximation techniques, average case techniques, fixed parameter tractability, backdoor methods, randomized methods, spectral properties, and all of those. And if we look at work that's typically carried out in the field of algorithmics, what we will find is that after a particular range of problems has been shown to be technically hard, we get investigation of those techniques, trying to make them effectively easier. So, a few of those routes have been explored. There's been work on fixed parameter tractability. There's been some work on average case algorithms. There have been methods which have been at least touched upon, the use of spectral methods, the use of backdoor methods, but there are also several which I think have been largely neglected and perhaps deserve rather more detailed attention. So there's a case of what I refer to as randomized algorithms. I'm not aware of a huge amount of work done in the field of randomized algorithms for argumentation problems. So perhaps what we need is less effort on identifying what makes a problem hard and more effort concentrated on finding ways of making it easier. So, what should the complexity theorists, including myself, be doing? Now here are some basic, what I think are perhaps rather obvious, perhaps not so, guiding principles. Problems drive results. Results do not drive problems. Argumentation at heart is concerned with capacities for reasoning. So complexity studies have to focus on that capacity, very much as a work on new semantics and to work on new models. Never seems to have forgotten that the core notion is that of argumentation. Esoteric complexity classes, of which there are a few around, particularly in the case of ideal semantics, well, they're probably really only of interest to esoteric complexity theorists. Results have to inform about the nature of feasible achievement in real situations. And finally, not really any point in proving a problem is difficult if no one's interested in that problem in the first place. So just to summarize, when we build, let us think that we build forever. Let it not be for present delight nor for present use alone. Let it be such work as our descendants will thank us for. So, as is, of course, the case, I've worked with very many people, specifically in the area of algorithms and complexity for argumentation. As standard here, I'd like to list all of them. I realize I may have missed a few names. My sincere apologies if that is the case. So, thank everybody for listening, and if there are any questions, I will be delighted to try and answer them. Thank you very much.